This program is made possible by financial support from viewers like you.
What are you babbling about?
What are you babbling on about now?
What on earth are you babbling on about?
This is Babbling On in Babylon, brought to you by Bible and a Bicycle on YouTube.
Shalom, shalom, friends and family, and welcome back, fellow believers. My name is Will, and I'm an aspired follower of Yeshua HaMashiach. You might know him as Jesus Christ. Last week we were diving into the conspiracy rabbit holes of the whole UAP UFO scene and blowing some whistles on some of those UFO whistleblowers. I promised you a part 2, and a part 2 you'll get. And if you're curious as to why I'm spending so much time focusing on these here conspiracy theories, well, as many of you might already be aware of, at one point I was quite the conspiracy nutter myself. Back in the 80s and 90s especially, before the internet was so widely available and information was at our fingertips, it was a little bit more difficult to prove or disprove these here kind of conspiracy theories, which left a lot of us stumbling around in the dark and believing whatever tall tales we might be told. Now, as a believer and a seeker of truth, I think it's only fair and fitting for myself and for any of you out there who might be falling for these very same deceptions, that we revisit some of these conspiracy theories and expose them for either the truth or the lies that they are. And with that in mind, I'd like to quote John 8:32. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So let's free ourselves and open our minds and dive back into this whole history of the UFO whistleblowers. As the scriptures say, and this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ. With that in mind, so let's dive back in.
Babbling on and on and on about...
Come on, it's just, you're very kind, but I wouldn't call my babbling poetic.
In 1989, the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, yes, it's a real thing, found itself caught in a bit of a drama. On one side, you had the classic UFO enthusiasts like astronomer Jacques Vallee and, to some extent, nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, who genuinely wanted to get the scientific community to take a look at UFOs seriously. Then, on the other side, you had John Lear and his crew of conspiracy theorists who were all about government cover-ups, alien autopsies, and making grand claims with little more than rumors and suspiciously forged documents to back them up. So when MUFON decided to hold a symposium in Las Vegas that year, Lear's hometown, where he was also a volunteer state director, Lear demanded his crew be given a significant speaking slot. MUFON's leadership, not wanting to rock the boat too much, refused at first, but Lear, not one for subtlety, threatened to host a rival symposium that would steal the show. Eventually, MUFON caved, and the theme of the symposium was set: the UFO Cover-up, a government conspiracy? At the symposium, the ideal of a government UFO cover-up was indeed floated, but not by Lear and his squad. Instead, it came from Bill Moore, a well-respected UFO researcher who dropped a bombshell. He admitted to being involved in government disinformation operations. But plot twist, it wasn't about hiding UFOs. It was about encouraging the belief that UFOs were of an extraterrestrial origin. This revelation made Moore look bad, and, unfortunately for Lear and his camp, a lot of their UFO mythology was based on Moore's supposed inside knowledge, now revealed to be a lot of smoke and mirrors. Meanwhile, in the midst of all this drama, a newcomer named Bill Cooper made his debut at the symposium. Reading from his statement, "The Secret Government, the Origin, Identity, and Purpose of MJ-12. Cooper claimed he had seen classified documents in the Navy revealing the government's deep, dark secrets about extraterrestrials. Yep, just like the UFO whistleblowers we see today, Cooper claimed to have personally witnessed UAP and had the classified intel to back it up. Sound familiar? Just like recent claims from a former Air Force intelligence officer, David Grush, who testified in front of Congress this summer about the government's UFO secrets. As I dig deeper into the history of American UFO whistleblowers, I'm starting to think Bill Moore was right when he said in 1989, "The current crop of disinformation is really nothing new. It's just that a different crop of people are spreading it this time around." The rift in MUFON in 1989 kind of reflects the bigger divide among UFO researchers, the light side and the dark side. The light side folks think extraterrestrials are benevolent beings who just want to help us reach a new age of enlightenment and prosperity. Think UFO religions led by people like George Van Tassel, who believed he was in telepathic contact with aliens, or cults like Heaven's Gate. Yikes! On the other hand, the dark side folks like John Lear and his crew saw aliens as the bad guys. According to Lear, these extraterrestrials had duped the U.S. government and were involved in cattle mutilations and other creepy activities. And who took this dark side narrative even further? None other than Bill Cooper, who built on Lear's claims and said the aliens were part of a grand conspiracy to control humanity through drugs, bioengineered diseases, and of course, abductions. Oh, and let's not forget his claim that the most famous murder in modern history, JFK's assassination, was part of this plot. Over time, Cooper's ideals turned more sinister, even connecting this conspiracy to satanic forces. Yup, he went there. While David Grush hasn't gone down that particular rabbit hole, some of the recent UFO whistleblowers, like former Pentagon official Lou Elizondo, seem to be taking cues from the dark side UFOlogy movement. Elizondo has claimed that the government suppresses UAP research because they think the phenomenon is demonic. Whether that's true or not, it shows that the ideals pushed by the dark side UFO theorists of the 80s and 90s are still lurking around today. And here's where it gets really interesting. Bill Cooper's influence didn't stop with UFOs. His brand of conspiracy thinking spread into other dangerous areas, continuing to fuel harmful movements. And while creepy alien conspiracies have been a staple in horror films since forever, thanks to Hollywood, what's truly terrifying is how Cooper's skillful manipulations helped him become perhaps the most influential conspiracy theorist in modern history. And yeah, it's still leading people into some seriously dark places today. Milton William Cooper grew up as a military brat. His dad was a pilot in the Army Air Corps, and Bill bounced around air bases, many of them overseas, never staying in one place long enough to feel at home anywhere. Because of this, most of what he understood about America and American culture came from the military and the American Forces Radio and Television Services, AFRTS. The irony is that later on, he'd present himself as a champion of pure American ideal, even though he'd never really experienced it himself. He'd also become the voice of many militia and patriot types, despite having always felt somewhat disconnected from his country. As a teenager, at an air base near Tokyo, he had his first taste of radio when he got an hour to DJ, playing tunes from Elvis, Sam Cooke, Nat King Cole, and big band music. Not too surprising that when he came of age, he joined the service, first the Air Force in 1962, and then the Navy in 1966, serving as a patrol boat commander in Vietnam. He saw a lot of action, lost some friends, but earned a Medal of Valor for his efforts. Afterward, he landed a cushy office gig in Hawaii, working on Admiral Bernard Clary's briefing team in the Office of Naval Intelligence. He claimed he needed a top-secret Q clearance for this job. Bill Cooper would later be the first conspiracy guy to make a big deal about his Q clearance, implying it gave him access to the most guarded government secrets. But the truth is, having a Q clearance for an office job at a security facility is really not that impressive. Q clearance is actually a Department of Energy thing. It doesn't make much sense that Cooper would have had it in naval intelligence. He likely had a different type of clearance. But this is the first sign that Cooper might have been stretching the truth about his time in Hawaii and the classified info he supposedly saw. Over the years, whenever a new conspiracy theory popped up, Cooper would claim that he had seen classified documents in that magical filing cabinet in Hawaii that backed it up. According to Cooper's version of reality, any office worker with clearance could apparently browse UFO-related government files from an unsecured cabinet stuffed with secrets. After leaving the Navy, Cooper moved to California, where he married several women, struggled with a variety of business ventures, battled PTSD, and turned to alcohol and spousal abuse. During these years, he was in 2 terrible motorcycle accidents, one of which led him to losing a leg. Later, Cooper would claim that these accidents were actually attempts on his life, with government agents running him off the road and threatening him in the hospital if he ever spoke about what he had seen in that fabled filing cabinet. His dad, however, had a different take. He said the accidents were Cooper's own fault and that alcohol might have been involved. In 1981 and 82, Cooper had a breakdown and was hospitalized for his PTSD. But by the late 80s, he found his niche while browsing the wild world of electronic bulletin boards on the internet. He stumbled across a message board called Paranet, where UFOologists and conspiracy theorists were sharing ideals. In 1988, Cooper decided to join the conversation and told his story to the board's operator, who introduced him as a genuine military witness. Cooper's story was about standing on a surface submarine in 1966 and seeing a huge unidentified craft dive into the ocean, pop back out, and jet off into the clouds. It wasn't the most groundbreaking UFO sighting, but Cooper added a twist, claiming his commanding officer swore all the witnesses to secrecy. Cooper's post got overshadowed when, a few days later, John Lear released his Lear hypothesis on the same board. Possibly jealous of the attention Lear's outlandish claims got, Cooper chimed in, saying he could confirm half of what Lear said based on classified documents he'd seen in the overflowing file cabinet. Lear and Cooper connected, and soon Cooper was hanging out with Lear in Vegas, drinking and spinning their dark side conspiracy narrative. Where Lear had latched onto the Majestic 12 forgery and expanded on it, Cooper did the same, adding his spin from what he claimed to have seen in the Naval Intelligence Office. Like Lear, Cooper got on the cattle mutilation bandwagon, comparing them to vampire stories of the past. He was sort of bumping into the truth, since both phenomena are easily explained by natural decomposition. But he misinterpreted them as something supernatural. When Lear started promoting the story of Bill English, a former Special Forces member who claimed to have seen a suppressed report from Project Blue Book, Report 13, Cooper jumped on the bandwagon, claiming he too had seen a version of the report in that same filing cabinet. Either Lear didn't find it strange that Cooper had never mentioned the Report 13 before, or he chose to overlook that small inconsistency. After making his mark with MUFON, Lear arranged both for him and Cooper to speak at the 1989 UFO Symposium, where Cooper debuted his unique mix of UFO conspiracies and the secret world government theories, ideals that would later grow into his bigger, unifying conspiracy theory. At the symposium, Cooper read his paper in a monotone, listing classified documents and project names to outline a massive conspiracy involving groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission. He said these groups were full of secret society members from Ivy League schools, like Skull and Crossbones, ideals that later became key parts of popular conspiracy theory. You could tell he thought of himself as the smartest guy in the room, as he kept stopping to ask if anyone understood what he had just said. Like Lear before him, when faced with evidence that the MJ-12 papers were fakes, Cooper doubled down, insisting they were real, and that Majestic 12, now Majority 12, was part of the New World Order. Unlike Lear, Cooper's theories were deeply tied to global politics, all of which he believed were connected to the alien cover-up and a secret world government. When the audience doubted him, he said he didn't care if they believed, that he was just morally obligated to share the truth. Still, it was clear that his moral obligation didn't stop him from announcing he would be selling copies of his speech afterwards. At that very symposium, after Bill Moore admitted to feeding UFOologists false government information, which in some ways discredited the claims of Lear and Bill Cooper, Cooper reportedly went off, feeling betrayed by Lear for passing him disinformation. This is a pretty clear sign that Cooper was probably lying all along when he had said he'd seen classified documents in the Office of Naval Intelligence confirming Lear's claims. If that was true, it wouldn't make sense for him to blame Lear for spreading false info. But there are even stronger reasons to question Cooper's UFO claims. For instance, one of his more out there assertions was that the absence of the RH factor in some people proved humans were genetically engineered by extraterrestrials. He argued that the RH factor, which is named after rhesus monkeys, is some leftover genetic mark from monkey DNA, so people without it must be products of alien experimentation. The problem is that the rhesus blood type just got its name because it was the first discovered in rhesus monkeys, not because it's some special evolutionary marker. Another example of Cooper's baseless claims involves a NASA cover-up. Like Donald Keyhoe, who spread false ideals about lunar bases, Cooper liked to show blurry photos of the moon during his lectures and claimed they proved structures were on the lunar surface. He'd stress they were real photos, which didn't mean much. Sure, the photos were real, but they definitely didn't show what he thought they did. Cooper said that NASA suppressed these photos after they were published because they revealed secret information. In reality, the book that contained the images, The Moon as Viewed by the Lunar Orbiter, had a small print run and went out of print. The next year, a more comprehensive book, Lunar Orbiter Photographic Atlas of the Moon, was published, and that's what replaced it. Plus, back then, the moon's orbital photos were in low resolution because they were transmitted as analog data and had to be pieced together. The higher quality images we have today only came after volunteers started recovering the data in the late 2000s. Now, the original NASA volume that Cooper claimed was suppressed is available online, digitized by NASA. And just like the so-called Pyramid and Face on Mars, which Cooper also promoted, these claims have been debunked with higher resolution imagery.
Hey, real quick. Big thanks to everyone out there listening to Babbling On in Babylon, brought to you by Bible and a Bicycle. It seriously means a lot that you're here. If you're enjoying the podcast, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and maybe share it with a friend who'd get something out of it too. It helps way more than you might think. And if you want to support the show in a bigger way, check out the links in the description. There's merch, memberships, and other ways to help keep this thing rolling.
Are you tired of carrying the weight of the world? Do you suffer from chronic hopelessness, persistent guilt, or an unshakable sense that something is missing?
Introducing the Bible, the time-tested, soul-approved solution to the human condition. Not just another book, but a revolutionary life treatment backed by thousands of years of divine research. The Bible works naturally with your heart and mind to reveal your purpose, provide peace, and even reconnect you with your Creator. Side effects may include sudden outbursts of joy, unexplainable hope in dark circumstances, increased compassion and patience, talking to God like He's actually listening. He is. Freedom from fear, guilt, and shame. Radical forgiveness of others and yourself. Occasional moments of, wow, I really needed to hear that. A burning desire to love your neighbor, even if they play the drums at midnight. Not recommended for people who enjoy holding grudges, hate being challenged, or insist on being their own God. Results may vary, but eternal life is guaranteed with regular use. Consult your Creator before starting a Bible regimen. Side effects increase with prayer. The Bible. Ask your soul if it's right for you.
It's also pretty easy to show that Cooper lacked credibility by pointing out that many of the things that he said he had confirmed from classified documents turned out to be hoaxes. This goes beyond the majestic 12 forgeries. He also pushed the story of the 1948 UFO crash near Aztec, New Mexico. That story had been debunked in the 1950s as a hoax by two con men who claimed to have alien tech for sale. Bill Moore at the MUFON symposium suggested the story resurfaced because of government disinformation. So it was really a twice debunked story, which also debunks Cooper's claims that he had access to real government secrets. Unless, as he might have suggested, the government planted fake documents and naval intelligence files just to mislead random office workers. Cooper also talked about Alternative 3, the supposed secret government plan to establish colonies on the Moon and Mars. This idea was pretty much lifted from a 1977 British TV documentary called Alternative 3, which started as a report on the brain drain and turned into a supposed investigation about missing scientists. The documentary claimed these scientists were recruited for a secret space program to build colonies on the Moon and Mars to save the elite from a global climate disaster. It even showed footage of astronauts on Mars filming an alien moving under the sand. Needless to say, this documentary was a work of fiction, a mockumentary intended as satire on fringe beliefs and government conspiracy theories, meant to air on April 1st as an April Fool's joke. However, due to scheduling issues, it was broadcast on June 20th instead. There was no reason to take Alternative 3 seriously, but that didn't stop Cooper from repeating its claims without mentioning the mockumentary's true purpose. This isn't really surprising when you think about it, though, because it's pretty clear that the known fictionality of a claim wouldn't stop Bill Cooper from claiming it was true. In fact, he'd argue that it had just been dramatized as fiction to make you doubt it. For instance, Cooper said the events in Close Encounters of the Third Kind really happened. When he talked about alien races in contact with Earth and its secret government, he listed the usual suspects. Greys from Orion or Zeta Reticuli or whatever. But he also tossed in the benevolent Teros and the sinister subterranean Deros, a direct reference to the Shaver hoax. Shaver's hoax was the wild ramblings of a paranoid schizophrenic that Sci-Fi magazine editor Ray Palmer turned into a stunt to boost readership. So, yet again, Cooper was repeating fiction like it was secret knowledge he'd seen in a naval intelligence filing cabinet somewhere. In fact, his habit of promoting known falsehoods is what eventually led to his fallout with John Lear and with UFOlogy as a whole. One of Cooper's many tall tales was claiming to have seen the original Krill papers while in naval intelligence. These papers, written by someone named O.H. Krill in 1988, seemed to support much of what Lear and Cooper were claiming. Cooper even said he knew Krill was actually an alien hostage. But it turns out, as John Lear apparently told Cooper more than once, Lear himself wrote the Krill papers. Just another forgery to build up UFO lore. When Lear admitted to co-authoring it with John Grace, Cooper doubled down and accused Lear of lying about it. After this, Cooper's relationship with Lear, and UFOlogy in general, started to unravel. After a couple of years of unsupported claims and promoting hoaxes, the UFOologist who had once given Cooper the benefit of the doubt began turning on him. Even Don Ecker, one of Lear's original dark side proteges, started to lose patience, writing in a 1990 UFO magazine article, "Who are the UFO whistleblowers? They came out of relative obscurity and burst into the center of UFOlogy attention, making credible claims of alien activity on Earth and the government's covert involvement. Without exception, the whistleblowers of recent times only furnish the most hazy evidence of their claims. Honestly, this could be said about UFO whistleblowers today. So, Cooper had a fallout with Lear and MUFON. He started claiming they were part of the conspiracy part of the cover-up. Lear's CIA connections through Air America meant he was running their disinformation, and MUFON was just a government front organization used to control the UFO narrative. You'd think this would limit his platform, but Bill Cooper was already evolving. Norio Hayawakawa, a UFO enthusiast in California, had heard him speak and arranged a successful lecture at Hollywood High School in 1989. And from there, Cooper's speaking career took off. As he traveled and lectured, his claims shifted, moving away from alien conspiracies and focusing more on darker, broader theories about the New World Order. And that's probably about the time I ran across Cooper's ideologies. He leaned into widespread conspiracy theories, adding his own spin. For example, he helped spread the HIV as a U.S. bioweapon claim, sharing a legislative text he claimed proved the virus was engineered. The bill, however, was actually urging research in case a rival nation developed such a biological weapon. It had nothing to do with HIV. Similarly, Cooper developed his own theory about the JFK assassination, a cornerstone of modern conspiracy thinking, claiming that in some blurry footage you could see a Secret Service agent, William Greer, turning around and aiming a handgun at President Kennedy. Of course, what you're actually seeing is the sunlight reflecting off of Greer's shiny hair, while the agent in the passenger seat also turns to look at Kennedy. Cooper often started his JFK theory by showing a slide with a quote he attributed to Kennedy. "The high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy America's freedom, and before I leave this office, I must inform the citizens of their plight." Cooper claimed Kennedy knew about the alien cover-up and was killed to silence him. The problem? That quote is completely made up. Kennedy never said it. Cooper's takes on these conspiracy theories show how his claims evolved. He used to claim AIDS was part of the alien cover-up, that spreading disease and controlling humanity was the aliens' plan. Later, he just claimed it was part of the New World Order agenda, with aliens being a smokescreen. He didn't just claim Kennedy was killed because of his knowledge of aliens. He also said Greer was an alien who used alien technology to shoot Kennedy. But when Cooper moved away from his UFO roots, he started saying Greer used a dart gun with shellfish toxins, and Kennedy was killed because he was about to expose the New World Order. So after years of claiming UFOs and aliens were real, Cooper would later flip-flop and say it was all government disinformation, which in his own way might have been his attempt at getting closer to the truth. Next in Cooper's career came what would end up being his most significant legacy, his book, Behold a Pale Horse. He managed to get it published by a small New Age printer that mainly focused on mystical works. I should point out that he got the book published, not that he wrote it, because while it does include some autobiographical parts where Cooper tries to build his credibility by talking about his time in the Naval Intelligence, a lot of the book is just reprinted documents, some of which are forgeries or hoaxes. One example is the report from Iron Mountain, published in 1967. It claimed to be the official report of a secret government study group that met in a bunker. The report suggested that a society needed a war, or some kind of threat of war, to stay stable, and even recommended the threat of alien contact as a possible substitute. This fit perfectly with Cooper's growing conspiracy narrative. But the problem? In 1990, it was revealed that Leonard Lewin had written it as a satire and had been sold as nonfiction by its publishers, including novelist E.L. Doctorow, as part of a publicity stunt. But Cooper and other conspiracy theorists, they still insist it's real. Another big part of Cooper's book was a 1979 pamphlet called Concentration Camp Plans for U.S. Citizens, which he used to amplify the ideal of FEMA camps, a conspiracy theory about the Federal Emergency Management Agency allegedly planning camps for U.S. citizens. The pamphlet and Cooper's reprints led to lists of supposed FEMA camp locations, like abandoned prisons or factories, without any solid evidence. This would only snowball with social media, where people started posting photos of any structure that looked like it could be a camp, often photoshopped, and claiming they had a real image. Cooper's book also included a document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, supposedly an introductory programming manual for people joining the secret government conspiracy. The document claimed that World War III was happening, not with armies, but on civilians, using misinformation and economic manipulation as weapons. I can't say he was far off from the truth on that one. Some of the document's observations seem somewhat valid, but the idea that it was all a planned operation by a secret group, that was a stretch. Most people thought Cooper had written it himself, but it actually came from a copy machine and circulated in conspiracist newspapers before it reached Cooper. In 2003, a guy named Hartford Van Dyke, who was serving time for counterfeiting, claimed he had sent out 600,000 fake dollars to the IRS with a note saying it was fake money to satisfy fake debts. Van Dyke didn't claim Silent Weapons was genuine. It was his manifesto, a reflection of his sociopathy more than anything else. But Cooper printed it as if it were undeniable proof of a massive conspiracy. And perhaps the most outrageous reproduction in Cooper's book was The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. If you're unfamiliar, it's a plagiarized forgery that created the false ideal of a global Jewish conspiracy. Cooper, in his usual style, told readers that even though it might not be a Jewish conspiracy, it still pointed to a real conspiracy, telling them to replace the word Jew with Illuminati. Cooper wove the Illuminati into his own version of the New World Order conspiracy, but he claimed the roots of the conspiracy went way back, starting at the dawn of human history. He further expanded on his ideals during his next career phase, hosting a show on the Worldwide Country Radio, a shortwave station in Tennessee known for religious programming, conspiracy theorists, and right-wing extremists. Every episode of his show, The Hour of the Time, kicked off with the sound of klaxons and jackbooted marching, signaling his apocalyptic worldview. On this program, Cooper traced the New World Order conspiracy from modern groups like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group back to the Bavarian Illuminati, and before them, the Freemasons, and, of course, before them, the Knights Templar. He claimed these groups were all part of an ancient secret society that evolved through the ages, taking on new names. Cooper traced the society all the way back through the Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, and to something he called the Brotherhood of the Serpent. A lot of his ideals weren't new. He was really just repackaging theories he had read elsewhere, especially from a 1989 book called The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, which suggested this ancient society was made up of extraterrestrials trying to control human history. As Cooper moved away from the alien angle, he still found ways to use those ideals, twisting them to fit his increasingly religious, end-of-the-world beliefs. This had always been part of his story, dating back to his early days with MUFON, when he claimed the government had found a prophecy hidden in the Vatican predicting end-times events for the 90s. Of course, none of those things actually happened, but the ideal stuck. He started to push the ideal that the shadowy forces shaping global events were following the timeline laid out in Revelation, working to make it come true. He even suggested the mark of the beast could already be here, maybe in the form of barcodes. One way to track how his views evolved is through his shifting thoughts on the Kennedy assassination. Eventually, when it wasn't aliens involved, Cooper started to claim it was the work of the New World Order, specifically a Luciferian plot. He even argued that the Daily Plaza was an occult hotspot and Kennedy was a human sacrifice. He also threw in a bit of math, saying if you subtract 1307, the year the Knights Templar were suppressed, from 1963, the year JFK was shot, you get 666, the number of the beast. Technically, that gives you 656, but his fans probably didn't check the math. Cooper's show on shortwave radio started attracting listeners from survivalist groups, white separatists, and Christian identity folks, militias, and these were the same type of people who were already listening to other hosts who had built their followings among groups like the Silent Brotherhood or the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, groups known for armed robbery and violence. Cooper, for his part, publicly called the Christian identity movement the biggest bunch of hogwash he had ever heard, saying they were completely mental and lying to us. Despite reprinting the anti-Semitic protocols of the Elders of Zion in his book, he denied being anti-Semitic. But as time went on, he started voicing more and more anti-Semitic views, including Holocaust denial. Some of his comments pushed away the Patriot militia crowd, but others found his broadcast appealing, especially after the Waco siege in 1993. While he did point out real flaws in how the government had handled Waco, and boy, there were plenty, he mixed in plenty of falsehoods, like claiming the government gave the Branch Davidians poison milk, or misrepresenting David Koresh as a regular guy instead of a polygamist and child rapist. He would later do the same with the Oklahoma City bombing, calling Timothy McVeigh a patsy and claiming the bombing was a false flag operation. But the kicker came when it was revealed that McVeigh and his accomplices were actually listeners of Cooper's show. In court, they admitted Cooper's show had inspired their anti-government actions. It was also revealed that McVeigh had even visited Cooper before the bombing, telling him to watch Oklahoma City. Yet Cooper continued to claim McVeigh was innocent and the bombing was a setup, further discrediting himself. Bill Cooper's rise on the internet and through his radio broadcast left a huge mark on fringe beliefs. He popularized a lot of conspiracy claims we still hear today, and even came up with the phrases that people now mock when talking about conspiracy theorists, like sheeple. He was big on telling people to do your own research, but somehow didn't seem to notice the contradiction in that while he was claiming the mainstream media wasn't free, he was encouraging people to create and publish their own content, even if it was full of false claims. He's even credited with predicting things like the move towards a cashless society, though this ideal is a lot more extreme than what's happened. He thought yard sales would be illegal and small transactions would lead to prison time. Does that sound like today's world, where cash and Venmo are still widely used with no issues from the IRS? People also say Cooper predicted 9/11, but in reality, he was just responding to a CNN interview with Osama bin Laden. He claimed it was propaganda, but the truth was, the U.S. government had struggled to catch bin Laden because he was hiding with the Taliban. The reporter who interviewed bin Laden wasn't some undercover agent. It was a journalist invited to do an interview because bin Laden wanted to take credit for the attacks. Cooper's prediction was nothing more than a talking point of 9/11 truthers that cropped up after his death. In fact, the most famous 9/11 conspiracy documentary, Loose Change, was accused of copying ideals from Cooper's work. Some also say that Cooper predicted his own death at the hands of the government. A few months after making his 9/11 claims, Cooper was killed in a shootout with authorities at his home. His followers, of course, saw it as the government silencing him. But in reality, Cooper had been wanted for years due to tax evasion. Local sheriffs had delayed his arrest for a long time because they knew he wouldn't go down easily. When they finally moved to arrest him, they used a ruse to lure him out. But Cooper wasn't having it. He tried to drive through the roadblock, crashed, and started shooting. He ended up shooting a deputy in the head, and another deputy shot and killed him in return. In a way, Cooper's death was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. He had already told a friend that he had decided what he was going to do now, and that he can always be a martyr. Cooper's legacy is bigger than many people realize. He made a major impact on UFOlogy and conspiracy culture, especially among anti-government militia groups and domestic extremists who admired him enough to visit him for advice. Surprisingly, his book, Behold the Pale Horse, also became popular in the black community, especially through the Nation of Islam in New York. It was widely read in federal prisons and became, according to some reports, the most stolen book in the country. Cooper's influence even reached into rap music, with artists like Public Enemy, Tupac, Nas, Ghostface Killah, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, Mobb Deep, and Busta Rhymes, all making references to Cooper and his ideals. As I mentioned earlier, Cooper is often credited as the origin of the 9/11 truther movement, but his influence stretched far beyond that, especially with other conspiracy theorists, one of whom would eventually follow in his footsteps. Alex Jones, a young shortwave broadcaster in his 20s, started his career on the same network as Bill Cooper. Jones had been listening to the Hour of the Time for years, and in many ways, modeled himself after Cooper. Many of the false flag claims Jones would later make throughout his career were essentially recycled from Cooper's earlier assertions, just tweaked for the next big tragedy. Jones is probably best known for his wild claims about school shootings being government orchestrated, which, you guessed it, was something Bill Cooper had said before. In fact, Cooper reportedly couldn't stand Alex Jones, thinking of him as a rival who was stealing his entire shtick. We continue to see many of the same conspiracies that Cooper promoted. One of Cooper's most influential ideals was that the powers that be in government, or the so-called deep state, were actually part of a sinister Luciferian cult. You can trace that ideal directly back to him. And again, I don't think he's that far off on that one. And when he was called a cult figure, he pushed back on the term. However, if we really think about it, the word cult fits, but not necessarily in the typical religious or fringe sense. It's more about the intense devotion people have to these out there beliefs, or to a figure who promotes them. Just like the Branch Davidians had their own devotion to David Koresh, there was a similar cult of personality around Cooper himself. Look at John Lear and his followers in the dark side UFO mythology crowd. Some could argue they fit the definition of a cult too. Despite all logic and evidence to the contrary, they're deeply committed to spreading these dubious fringe beliefs. And as we'll see in the final part of this series on blowing the whistle on UFO whistleblowers, Cooper's circle eventually gave rise to another influential figure in UFOlogy, who, while divisive, inspired his own real cult of personality, Bob Lazar. Lazar, with his claims about Area 51, will later be shown to have direct ties to the recent testimony made under oath to Congress by David Grush. Until next time, just remember, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.